Hello there, I'm Carole Lehan. Welcome to Sunday. Father Stan DeBow joins us on today's program. Father DeBow is a Trinitarian father who serves as the director of the Office of Justice and Peace for the Conference of Major Superiors of Men. The Sunday players will proclaim the Gospel. This Sunday we read from the Gospel of Mark. Then Maggie Linton will expand on the Gospel theme of divorce on Bible background. And Jem Sullivan will bring our program to a close with some thoughts on a painting by Thomas Cole depicting the voyage of life. That's what we have lined up for you on this edition of Sunday to Sunday on this 27th Sunday in Ordinary Time, 2003. The story of Genesis captures the human imagination. It speaks of the origins of all that exists, and it answers the basic human question, where did all that is come from? In our first reading, the author of Genesis is not so much concerned with historical accuracy. Instead, he is communicating the spiritual truths about the origin of creation in God. In particular, our attention is focused on the creation of man and woman in the image of God. The story of the creation of Eve from Adam's rib has been used by some to speak of women as inferior to men. In actuality, this is a misreading of the text. The rib drawn from the man's side figuratively expresses the equality of man and woman. They were created to complement one another and lead one another to union with God, the creator of all. You'll find the reading in the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verses 18 to 24. In our second reading, the author of the letter to the Hebrews gives us much to reflect on. At the heart of this passage is the suffering of Christ. We are called brothers and sisters of Christ, and this is a great privilege. Moreover, Christ's sufferings and death are the means by which you and I are brought into closer union with God. Christ's life, death, and resurrection remains the central event of our life of faith. And for this, we are always grateful. You can read those verses in the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 2, verses 9 to 11. And you'll find the final reading in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verses 2 to 16. After everyone in your group has read those verses, share your thoughts on today's theme. We'll be back here when you're ready. Welcome, Father DeBow. What do you have to tell us about this week's Gospel?
Thanks, Carole. Today we continue to read about Jesus' earthly ministry according to Mark. And in this Sunday's Gospel, Jesus is confronted with some controversial questions on marriage and divorce. This particular discussion on marriage is found in all of the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. However, Mark is very straightforward in the way he presents Jesus' teaching on the subject.
I notice that there are really two parts to this Gospel reading.
That's right, Carole. In fact, I think there are really three scenes that are recorded in these verses. First, the Pharisees are testing Jesus with a question about divorce. Then the conversation moves indoors, where Jesus further explains his teaching. And finally, Jesus continues to speak of the reign of God in the midst of a group of little children. One gospel reading with three distinct settings.
Do we know why the Pharisees raised the question regarding divorce?
It's actually not clear why, Carole. After all, divorce was permitted by Mosaic law. But whatever the reason, their questioning becomes the occasion for Mark to emphasize the original teaching of the book of Genesis. Jesus stresses the permanence of the union of marriage as originally intended by God.
So is Jesus undermining the authority of Moses?
From his teaching on divorce, it may appear that way, but in fact, Jesus is not undermining Moses' authority at all. The Pharisees are quoting from the 24th chapter of Deuteronomy, and Jesus answers in true rabbinic fashion. He answers Scripture by quoting from Scripture. Moses permitted divorce as a concession to human frailty and weakness. Jesus is trying to take his disciples back to the authority of God, the creator of all. In the original plan of God, what was joined together in marriage was not to be separated.
The scenes of Jesus and children in the Gospels are always moving. Why does Jesus get angry with the disciples in the final scene of this reading?
Mark doesn't tell us why the disciples disapproved of children coming to Jesus. In the society of Jesus' day, children and women had little or no personal rights or social status. Jesus reverses this mindset. Just like we read a few weeks ago, Jesus points to the children as models of those who would receive and enter into the reign of God. Their humble and childlike trust and dependence should characterize every Christian who seeks the reign of God. And as we listen to Jesus' words, we too are called to grow in childlike trust and humility before God.
Thanks, Father DeBow. Let's listen and watch the Sunday to Sunday players proclaim the gospel.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
The Pharisees approached Jesus and asked, "Is it lawful for a husband to divorce his wife?" They were testing him. He said to them in reply, "What did Moses command you?" They replied, "Moses permitted a husband to write a bill of divorce and dismiss her." But Jesus told them, "Because of the hardness of your hearts, he wrote this commandment. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man may leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh, so that they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no human being must separate." In the house, the disciples again questioned Jesus about this. He said to them, "Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery." And people were bringing children to him, that he might touch them. But the disciples rebuked them. When Jesus saw this, he became indignant and said, "Let the children come to me. Do not prevent them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Amen, I say to you, whoever does not accept the kingdom of God like a child will not enter it." Then he embraced them and blessed them, placing his hands on them.
Father DeBow has some reflections on the Bible and you.
Thanks, Carole. Love is one of the greatest dramas of human existence. I couldn't agree more with this observation of Pope John Paul II. The love between married couples, between parents and children, and the love of friends are all rich human experiences. They're filled with all the drama that comes with the human condition, from our strengths, our weaknesses, our sufferings, our pain. I'm sure you'll agree that Christian teaching on marriage are not always popular. This is certainly not one of the easiest gospels to preach on. And in my own pastoral ministry, I've become aware that we're called to greater sensitivity to the variety of human experiences surrounding marriage. Jesus teaches that marriage is a permanent and lasting bond intended by God to build up the human family, the church, and society. On the other hand, the church suffers with those who have found it impossible to live out this commitment to the fullest. Instead of judging and condemning, we're called as Christians to support those who attempt to live out their Christian marriages in fidelity and love, and to be compassionate for the pain and brokenness of those who have suffered while trying to do so. This is the example that Jesus gives us in today's gospel. In October 2001, Pope John Paul II beatified a married couple named Luigi and Maria Quattrochi in St. Peter's in Rome. This was the first time ever in the Church's 2,000-year history that a married couple has being presented as a model of saintly living. As they faced the difficulties and trials of family life, they were faithful to their vocation and mission of creating in their home a domestic church where love, joy, and faith flourished in their family. At their beatification in 2001, the Pope urged married couples everywhere to deepen their commitment to the vocation of marriage, drawing from the example of this couple's ordinary married lives. This week's gospel on the permanent character of Christian marriage can be a source of inspiration and encouragement to many married couples. For others, it may be painful and frustrating to hear. There are many couples who have lived this ideal with mutual self-giving and generosity. Others might have experienced great suffering when the ideal of a permanent marriage was impossible to live out. Today, in imitation of Jesus, the Church embraces all those who have entered into the journey of marriage. If we imitate his example, we too will grow in a deeper understanding of the human drama of love.
Thank you. It's time for your discussion, and we have some discussion starters for you. First, share one experience of the beauty of God's creation. Second, what does God's Word challenge you to do this week? And a third, identify examples of Christian marriage that are inspiring to you. I hope these starters are a help to your discussion. When you've finished with it, come back to the tape. Maggie Linton will share some of her thoughts with us. Maggie Linton joins us now on Bible Background with information on divorce in the biblical cultures of the past.
One of the most talked about issues in society today is divorce. The divorce rate in our country now affects nearly 1 out of every 2 marriages. Too frequently, divorce ends in court battles and broken homes. How is it then that Joseph, that just and quiet man of the Scriptures, intended to divorce Mary? In Matthew's Gospel, the story is told that Joseph decided to divorce Mary and put her away quietly because she was with child. Why would Joseph do this? The answer is because it was the law. In Hebrew tradition, the husband was obliged by law to divorce the woman to whom he was espoused if he knew she was not a virgin. Another part of the law forbade a Jew from marrying anyone not of his own religious beliefs. If a Jew chose to marry a person of another religion, the marriage was not recognized and divorce was acceptable. Malachi, the priest and prophet, protested against divorce and also against marriages of mixed religions. Malachi spoke against divorce for a profound but also practical reason. Because there is only one God and God is Father, Malachi reasoned a person must belong to the people of God to become part of the family circle. To marry outside of the circle breaks the bond of the divine family. The prophet says, just as God is the one spirit of all life, so man and wife are united in one spirit and one flesh. If God cannot be divided, neither should man and wife be separated. In times when divorce causes so much tragedy and pain in people's lives, the ancient words of Malachi the prophet show us that God's concern for his people is one of family bonding, a concern that touches us even today. For Bible Background, I'm Maggie Linton.
It's time to ask the question, what is God calling me to do this week? And I think I'm starting with the idea that the most inspirational couple I know are my parents, who this past summer celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. And my sister gathered for the huge event. It was like 200 people. She gathered pictures and created a video. It was like 25 minutes long. And when I looked at it, it was it was their life. When it was fabulous. And I think, how does that have anything to do with me in this week? I think in that, looking at that, I thought of my own marriage, and that I don't capture moments and relish moments. It would be horrible to get to the 50th year and then have forgotten everything. and so what I think I want to do is capture them right now, and maybe spend, it's a very simple thing, but spend time with some pictures that we have, because there was a great sentimentality that came over them in terms of, oh my gosh, we have done a great deal, haven't we? And you know, seeing them, and then seeing this brood of 21 grandchildren and their own 7 kids, and not that all of a sudden I'm going to have that, but capturing the moments allowed them to be very, very thankful. And I'm going to see how maybe this week I can begin that process with the idea that they had so much to be thankful for over their life. And I'll just tell you this. My father said, apparently, when they became engaged, he said something ridiculous like, life is hell, and I want to go through it with you. You know, something endearing and a winner. She said yes. And after 50 years, he has not experienced hell. Wow. They've been very fortunate in that way, you know. But anyway, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend some time with some of the memories that we've already captured, and try to appreciate them and thank God for them now.
That's wonderful. And maybe it wasn't hell because he had her.
I think that was his point, ultimately.
That's great. Oh, that's wonderful. I don't know if I'll use that in marriage preparation, but there's an idea there. I think this week it's going to be phone calls and letters. My father died when I was very young, so my mother raised my brother and myself on her own. So there was something about the fidelity of her love for him. But now she's also deceased. But I have an aunt. I have 3 couples that I would say are really models for me of married life, and I know that this week I need to call them. One is my aunt and uncle, and they've been married for over 50 years. And both of their children were killed in separate auto accidents when they were teenagers. Yeah. And yet their marriage and their love survived, even that. And that's
hard.
Just been, it really is, because sometimes people, you know, after something like that really find marriages falling apart and all of that, but they managed to hold it all together.
That's a lot of strength.
It really did, and they're kind of like my parents now, you know, so I don't have parents, and they don't have their children, and we kind of have each other, and so I need to let them know that. But the other 2 are young couples that I know, and they have families, and believe it or not, I tend to try to visit with them when I get vacation time and all of that, and they're all like, are you nuts? You know, our children drive you crazy. But it's just something about the refreshing feeling of being with a family, and I just need to let them know how important they are to my life, because being a celibate, being a priest, you know, you miss so many of those wonderful moments that you're talking about going back and capturing in pictures, but I get to live it through them, and I just want to thank them for letting me be a part of all of that, and just kind of showing me what that fidelity is all about, because I think in many ways I have it much easier when I just have to put up with myself and not everybody else.
I'm sure that they'll appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah,
that's
thank
great.
you.
Father Dubois and I have discussed God's call. It's time for you to do the same. When you've completed that brief discussion, come back to the tape for a closing prayer. We've heard the words of our gospel reading, and we've reflected on its message. Now join me in listening to Jem Sullivan, who concludes our program with a modern masterpiece from the National Gallery of Art.
In previous weeks, we've looked at a series of paintings by the American painter Thomas Cole entitled The Voyage of Life. As we conclude this week's program, we pause to reflect on another painting in that series. This image that now hangs in the National Gallery of Art is part of a series of 4 paintings on the key stages of every human life. This particular scene is entitled Voyage of Life, Adulthood. Compared to the serenity and optimism of other paintings in the series, this scene is somewhat turbulent and dramatic. The hero of the voyage is in a boat traveling down a turbulent stream of water. The background is a stormy night with high winds and waves crashing on rocks in the stream. The traveler, who is symbolic of a person in middle age, looks up to heaven with his hands locked in a gesture of pleading. In the midst of the storms and troubles of life, he looks up to heaven for divine help. The angel of light continues to guide the voyage of life, even as the hero endures the trials of middle age. In this masterful painting, Cole invites the viewer to recognize his or her own need for God in the midst of life's challenges.
Thanks for sharing God's Word with us today. We've just completed another edition of Sunday to Sunday. Next week, Tony Marinelli will be with us as we reflect on the 28th Sunday in Ordinary Time. So be sure to join us. Till then, for all the folks at Paulist Media Works, I'm Carole Lehan. Bye. Hello there, I'm Carole Lehan. Welcome to Sunday. Tony Marinelli is with us. Tony is a pastoral minister at St. Patrick's Parish, Huntington, New York. The Sunday to Sunday players will proclaim the gospel. This Sunday we read from the Gospel of Mark. Then Maggie Linton will tell us about the Book of Wisdom on Bible background. And the Blessed Sacrament Choir will bring our program to a close with a hymn prayer, Make Us One in Christ. That's what we have lined up for you on this edition of Sunday to Sunday on this 28th Sunday in Ordinary Time, 2003. All of us have had moments when we are confronted with difficult situations or decisions. In those moments, we hope and pray for wisdom to do or say the right thing. And that is what our first reading is all about. The author of the Book of Wisdom often speaks in the name of King Solomon. When he was about to begin his reign, Solomon begged for the gift of wisdom, and today's reading records that event for us. Solomon knew that with God's wisdom, he could be a just and discerning ruler. Wisdom is described as a gift from God that is to be preferred above all other things. God's wisdom is contrasted sharply with the riches of the world. It surpasses even physical health and beauty. Today, we are invited to reflect on the surpassing riches of God's wisdom, and we are encouraged to seek after it with all our heart. You'll find the reading in the Book of Wisdom, chapter 7, verses 7 to 11. Today's reading from the letter to the Hebrews speaks of God's Word as a two-edged sword, an image that speaks to the imagination. A sword is capable of penetrating, and it divides whatever it penetrates. In the same way, God's Word penetrates our hearts and minds and our lives. It helps us to discern right from wrong, justice from injustice, good from evil. It reads our innermost thoughts and motivates our daily actions of love, justice, and peace. As we reflect on this passage, we are thankful for the gift of God's Word and for the gift of sharing it with one another today and every Sunday through this program. You can read those verses in the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 4, verses 12 to 13. And you'll find the final reading in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verses 17 to 30. After everyone in your group has read those verses, share your thoughts on today's theme. We'll be back here when you're ready. Tony Marinelli joins me. Welcome, Tony.
Hi, Carole.
We have a great story for our gospel reading this week, the story of the rich young man. But it's the kind of reading that makes me squirm somewhat.
Well, I think it's supposed to make us squirm because it really runs contrary to all conventional wisdom.
The rich young man seems very sincere and on a real journey. He comes to Jesus seeking the path to eternal life. And at first, Jesus tells him to follow the commandments, but he says that he already does this. That's when things start to get a little dicey.
Yeah, that's right. But it's important to remember, there's a line in there that's really important. It says that Jesus looks on him with love. And I think that's very, very important. Now, Jesus invites him to give it all up and follow him. But it's an invitation of love. It's not really a condemnation of wealth. It's a challenge to move to a whole new level of awareness.
There's that killer line that we all hate to hear, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. It sounds like the American dream runs contrary to the Gospels.
No doubt about it. If my goal in life is to be wealthy, well, then I've got the wrong goal. The Gospels clearly see wealth as more of an obstacle than an aid to living a kingdom-based life. Material possessions are too addicting. They make us too complacent. They center my life around me instead of God and others. They can be a real temptation.
It's interesting how shocked the apostles are at this teaching of Jesus.
Think about it. In America, we tend to love wealth, but we have a real chance at it. In Palestine, 2,000 years ago, people struggled daily just to eat. So being wealthy was a dream far beyond those apostles could imagine. And now Jesus says to them that wealth is an obstacle to God's kingdom. I think you can just see these apostles thinking, he's got to be kidding me.
How are we supposed to make sense of this today? I'm not interested in selling all my possessions either, but I honestly don't think God wants me to do so.
I doubt that he does. I doubt that God wants us all to go on some kind of a guilt trip based on this reading. But there is a real challenge in it. The passage fits in with the entire gospel message. Conversion means letting go of things, of anything that can come between ourselves and God. Conversion means willing to let go of even good things for better things. Now, in this case, Jesus challenges the young man to take a huge risk, and the man is not ready for it. Or maybe he's unwilling to do it. I think the question before me is, what are the riches that I'm addicted to, that stand between me and God? Now, it may very well be a lifestyle that doesn't care at all about the poor, but it could be something quite different.
So I get to keep my house and car?
Yeah, only if you say please.
Thanks, Tony. As you ponder God's Word, listen and watch the Sunday to Sunday players proclaim the gospel.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
As Jesus was setting off on a journey, a man came up, knelt down before him, and asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus answered him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. You know the commandments. You shall not kill. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not defraud. Honor your father and your mother." He replied and said to him, "Teacher, all these things I have observed from my youth." Jesus, looking at him, loved him and said to him, "You are lacking in one thing. Go, sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me." At that statement, his face fell, and he went away sad, for he had many possessions. Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, "How hard it is for those who have wealth to enter the kingdom of God." The disciples were amazed at his words. So Jesus again said to them in reply, "Children, how hard it is to enter the kingdom of God. It is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for one who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. All things are possible for God." Peter began to say to him, "We have given up everything and followed you." Jesus said, "Amen, I say to you, there is no one who has given up house or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or lambs for my sake and the sake of the gospel, who will not receive 100 times more now in this present age, houses and brothers and sisters and mothers and children and lands, with persecution and eternal life in the age to come."
Tony has some reflections on today's gospel.
Thanks, Carole. Not long ago, I went to the movies with some friends, and we saw a film called Adaptation. I don't know if you've seen it or not. And when we left the theater, we all agreed that the movie was terrific. And then we started to talk about it. And we quickly discovered that the very same film was being given very different interpretations by the people who saw it. I hate to admit this, but I was convinced that I was the only one who really got it. It's amazing how stories can take on such different meanings to different people. And sometimes you're convinced, I've got it. Now, I think that's the case in today's gospel passage as well. What's this story about the rich young man really all about? What's it mean to you? What's it mean to me? It may very well depend on who you are, who I am. For me, the story of the rich young man is one of many stories in the gospel about the theme of conversion. The first words out of Jesus' mouth in the Gospel of Mark are a call to conversion. He says, "Change your hearts, for the kingdom is at hand." But it would appear that there are different kinds of conversion. Theologians like to write about this. The Jesuit theologian Bernard Lonergan often spoke of three basic conversions in life: a moral conversion, an intellectual conversion, and a religious conversion. The moral conversion is really when we decide to live our lives seeking to do what is truly good. Not good for me, but truly good. Intellectual conversion is the decision to use our brains, our minds, to seek the truth. In other words, not to get stuck in a world of personal biases and presumptions, but to discern what is really true. Religious conversion. What's that? Well, for Lonergan, religious conversion is when we begin to look at life not as a series of problems to be solved, but rather as a mystery to be lived. And at the heart of the mystery is a surrender to the gracious love of God. Now, today's gospel, I think, involves all three conversions. The rich young man is a seeker of truth. It's for that reason that he came to Jesus in the first place. But he will be quick to learn one of the most difficult lessons of conversion. The truth requires courage. The problem with the truth is that it requires us to see the world and ourselves as we really are, and that may demand dramatic changes in our lives. For this rich young man, I think, has also undergone a moral conversion. He's a good person. He keeps the commandments. But Jesus is really challenging him to that third conversion, that religious one, where he's called to surrender to the mystery of God's love. This rich young man is a good man. Jesus looks on him with love, but he's not ready for that last step. Who can blame him? It's one thing to be in control of your life and to be a good person. It's quite another to surrender one's life. And it's this final piece of the puzzle that can elude so many people. Those who have undergone such a conversion will often say things like, "My life is in God's hands." And they view themselves and all of life through the lens of their connection to God. The rich young man, not there yet. But whether he knows it or not, whether he can do it or not, his life is in God's hands, as is mine and as is yours. So Lord, this week we pray for the grace of ongoing conversion, more conversion. Turn our hearts more deeply to love what is good, to love what is true, and to follow wherever you lead.
Thank you. It's time for your discussion, and we have some discussion starters for you. First, do you pray for God's wisdom? Second, share one experience of the living and effective power of God's Word in your life. And a third, what steps can you take to be more detached from material possessions? I hope these starters are a help to your discussion. When you finish with it, come back to the tape. Maggie Linton will share some of her thoughts with us. Maggie Linton joins us now on Bible Background with her insights into the Old Testament book of wisdom.
It is often called the Book of the Wisdom of Solomon, but in truth, the Bible's Book of Wisdom was written many centuries after the time of Solomon. Many of us think of wisdom when we think about the Supreme Court. We expect thoughtful judges to interpret our laws for us after thinking through what might make our lives together better. A sophisticated list of do's and don'ts. Well, the Old Testament wisdom literature is a compilation of practical do's and don'ts, how to act or not act and remain faithful to the Jewish faith. The Book of Wisdom was probably written in Alexandria, a city in northern Egypt. Because the Jewish people were far from their native land, the life of Egypt seemed a threat to their faith in one God, Yahweh. So the author of Wisdom meditated on all the earlier sacred books. Just like you and me, he wondered how good people can suffer and the wicked seem to do well. He wondered how and where God puts his justice into action. As he meditated on the ancient books, the author of Wisdom also wrote words that would give hope and consolation to his contemporaries in Egypt. And that ancient wisdom offers us the same kind of hope and consolation today. In the Book of Wisdom, I'm Maggie Linton.
It's your turn to go first this week on the question, what is God calling me to do this week?
Well, I've decided to sell my house and the car, and I'm going to live a life of utter poverty.
Okay, yeah. And I am
No, that can't be it, right? Actually, I'm thinking about this, and one of my virtues, in the list of the three of them, is that I'm not really attached to stuff that much. So I don't really feel that. But what I am attached to is the little addictions that I have that help me from having to deal with people. You know, God I really like. It's people I have trouble with sometimes. and one of my little addictions is sports on TV. It's my little heroin shot when I just want to block out reality. And it keeps me from being creative, makes my brain go into a buzz mode. And it's just too easy to go click it on and dun-dun-dun. I'm watching ESPN or a ball game or something, and it's lazy. And it comes between me and creativity and connecting to people and family. And so that's where I went with this.
As you describe this, I'm thinking for me maybe it's the research that I'll do on the internet.
Interesting, yeah.
Because all I need is a topic, and I just love researching it. I'll make up topics if something. But our lights went out the other day, and we sat by candlelight in the living room, and we talked as a family.
God. And you had to wait for the internet to go back on.
It was
that's nice,
great.
Though.
Yeah, but no one reluctantly sat down. If I had orchestrated that, now we're going to sit down and talk.
Right.
It was a real good experience, I think, for all of us. And nobody really wanted to go to bed either, because we kind of liked the whole atmosphere. So yeah, I can't believe that I'm talking about that like that's refreshing. but
that makes sense, yeah.
It was great. So I think actually I could do without maybe. Now, do I make an announcement that this is what I'm doing this week, so everybody else do it too? See, that would be my.
Follow my lead.
I'm just gonna sit in the living room for everybody to go.
Anybody wants, I'll be here. Being real.
Okay, well, I'm gonna work on that. I'll have to tweak that a little bit.
Yeah.
Tony and I have discussed God's call. It's time for you to do the same. When you've completed that brief discussion, come back to the tape for a closing prayer. We've heard the words of our gospel reading and we've reflected on its message. Now join me in listening to the Blessed Sacrament Choir as they bring our program to a close with a hymn, Make Us One in Christ.
Spirit of
Thanks for sharing God's Word with us today. We've just completed another edition of Sunday to Sunday. Next week, Father Stan DeBow will be with us as we reflect on the 29th Sunday in Ordinary Time. So be sure to join us. Till then, for all the folks at Paulist Media Works, I'm Carole Lehan. Bye. Hello there, I'm Carole Lehan. Welcome to Sunday. Father Stan DeBow joins us once again on today's program. Father DeBow is a Trinitarian father who serves as the director of the Office of Justice and Peace for the Conference of Major Superiors of Men. The Sunday to Sunday players will proclaim the Gospel. This Sunday we read from the Gospel of Mark. Then Maggie Linton will tell us about Isaiah the prophet on Bible background. And the choir of St. Augustine's will bring our program to a close with song. That's what we have lined up for you on this edition of Sunday to Sunday on this 29th Sunday in Ordinary Time, 2003. Our first reading is taken from the fourth and final song of the suffering servant in the book of Isaiah. The sufferings of the servant of the Lord have intensified. Eventually, it will lead to his death. And this passage reflects on the cause and the outcome of such suffering. Isaiah tells us that God accepts the sufferings of the innocent victim. The ultimate outcome of his sufferings is not humiliation, but vindication and glory. Because of the anguish he suffered, writes Isaiah, he will see the light and obtain perfect knowledge. Who is the suffering servant in the book of the prophet Isaiah? Scholars continue to debate as to whether it refers to one single person or to the collective people of Israel. Many centuries later, Christians would apply this image to the person of Jesus, whose sufferings are a source of strength for many. You'll find the reading in the book of Isaiah, chapter 53, verses 10 to 11. Our second reading develops a theme that is repeated throughout the letter to the Hebrews. It is the image of Christ as the high priest who intercedes on behalf of those who look to him. The author reminds us that as high priest, Jesus was tempted in every way like us. His temptations enable him to empathize with the struggles of the human condition. As we reflect on this short passage, we are invited to hold fast to faith. Oftentimes we find ourselves in situations where that is really all we can humanly do, to trust in God's mercy and love for us. If we confidently approach God, we will receive the strength we need to remain faithful on our journeys of faith. You can read those verses in the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 4, verses 14 to 16. And you'll find the final reading in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verses 35 to 45. After everyone in your group has read those verses, share your thoughts on today's theme. We'll be back here when you're ready. Welcome, Father DeBow.
Thanks, Carole.
I'm intrigued by the question of the disciples in our gospel today. What can you tell us about this passage?
The conversation in this Sunday's Gospel is full of arguments and misunderstandings and reversals. What's intriguing is that the disciples have been with Jesus for quite some time now, yet their questions and bickering reveal that they don't as yet fully understand the meaning of Jesus' teachings. They have clearly missed the boat.
It's somewhat amusing that James and John would request a place of honor. What prompts them to make such a request?
I think it's helpful to situate their request in the context of the Jewish expectations of a Messiah. The Jews had long awaited a Messiah who would free them from social and political domination. In other words, they were looking for a political leader or a social liberator. Such a Messiah would be able to exercise control and authority over the Jewish people. So within this context, it's not surprising then that James and John were hoping to reserve some positions of authority for themselves.
Jesus clearly goes against their expectations. What a surprise they're in for.
Oh, that's for sure, Carole. As he so often does throughout the Gospels, Jesus reverses the disciples' expectations. Their somewhat foolish request becomes the occasion for Jesus to teach them about the meaning of true authority. And from the rest of the passage, it's safe to say that the disciples still don't seem to get it. It'll take a while before they grasp the depth of Jesus' teachings.
I would think that Jesus' words must have been a hard pill for the disciples to swallow.
Oh, no question, Carole. You see, Jesus is revealing the real nature of his life and ministry. His kingship was unlike the rulers of this world. His authority came not from prominence and status, but from his willingness to serve others. And suffering and self-sacrifice are critical dimensions of that service. This is one of the great paradoxes of Christianity. The one who exercises authority in the kingdom of God are the ones who are the servants of all. Jesus not only points to this way of service, but he'll lay down his life in loving service as well. In light of his sufferings and his death and resurrection, the disciples will come to understand the real meaning of his words.
As I listen to you, I realize that these words of Jesus are timeless, really. They apply to us today just as much as they applied to the disciples in the gospel.
Oh, that's for sure, Carole. In light of this gospel passage, those who are placed in positions of authority or leadership over others have a great challenge before them. Whether in civic or church leadership, Christian leaders are called to see themselves as servants of others, always willing to suffer and give of themselves. And this is no easy task. It requires us to be countercultural in many ways. But we have Jesus as our model, and today we too can draw strength from his words and his example.
Thanks, Father DeBow. Let's listen and watch the Sunday to Sunday players proclaim the gospel.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus and said to him,
Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you.
What do you ask me to do for you?
Grant that in your glory we may sit one at your right and the other at your left.
You do not know what you are asking. Can you drink from the cup that I drink? Or be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?
We can.
From the cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right and my left is not mine to give, but is for those for whom it has been prepared.
When the 10 heard this, they became indignant at James and John. Jesus summoned them and said to them,
You know that those who are recognized as rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones make their authority over them felt. But it shall not be so among you. For whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant, and whoever wishes to be the first among you will be the slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many.
Father DeBow has some reflections on the Bible and you.
Thanks, Carole. Whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you will be your servant. These words of Jesus conclude our gospel reading today, and it's these words that I invite you to ponder with me this week. As I was thinking about the paradox of servant leadership, I was reminded of a story I read some years ago that illustrates this gospel. It's a story of a Vietnamese archbishop named Cardinal Francis Xavier Van Thuan. As soon as he was made the Archbishop of Vietnam, he came into conflict with the communist authorities. They looked for any and every opportunity to accuse him of wrongdoing. But the Archbishop knew that his authority and spiritual leadership were of a different kind. His role as bishop and teacher was not a position of prestige and power. It was a call to service for his people. And in his case, it was a call to great personal suffering and injustice. The Vietnamese communist authorities captured the archbishop and sentenced him to solitary confinement in the worst of conditions. Without light and adequate food, he suffered the pain of isolation and abandonment for 13 long years. In prison, he celebrated the Eucharist every day with 3 drops of wine and a drop of water in the palm of his hand. That was his altar and his cathedral. And the food of the Eucharist was the medicine that strengthened him daily. In his own account of his imprisonment, he would write these words: "The martyrs taught us to say yes, a yes without conditions and limits to the love of the Lord. But the martyrs also taught us to say no, no to flattery, to compromise, to injustice, even with the intent of saving one's life." He added that his example was not a question of heroism, but of fidelity to Jesus' call to servant leadership. It amazes me to think that this story took place in our own lifetime. It's the kind of story we'd expect to hear from the early centuries of the church. Even today, though, there are many other such examples of Christian discipleship and leadership. For a Christian to be placed in a position of authority or leadership is to be willing to give one's life in self-sacrifice and service. Now, very few of us are called to give our lives in martyrdom or to suffer like this Vietnamese bishop did. But all of us as followers of Christ are called to offer ourselves in humility and service to others. This is the way, according to Jesus' own words and example, which leads us to discover the rewards of authentic Christian leadership.
Thank you. It's time for your discussion, and we have some discussion starters for you. First, based on today's gospel, name characteristics of Christian leadership and authority. Second, list examples of Christian leadership and service in your community. And a third, how are you called to Christian service this week? I hope these starters are a help to your discussion. When you finish with it, come back to the tape. Maggie Linton will share some of her thoughts with us. Maggie Linton joins us now on Bible Background with a more detailed look at the prophet Isaiah.
Oftentimes, we know the history of famous people. Most of us can say something about the life and times of someone like John F. Kennedy. We remember his birth in Boston and his political rise through Congress, the Senate, and the presidency. Kennedy was involved politically. Well, there was a prophet in Old Testament times who was just as involved politically in his times as Kennedy was in ours. The prophet was named Isaiah. He lived in Judah, the southern kingdom, and prophesied during the reign of 4 kings. He was married and the father of 2 children, each of whom bore symbolic names. Isaiah's task was to guide Judah through one of the most critical periods of her history. During his lifetime, Isaiah would see the kingdom of Israel destroyed and his own land invaded by the Assyrian armies. Probably the toughest thing for Isaiah to deal with was the loss of national nerve by the leaders of Judah. The lack of nerve caused them to seek accommodations with Assyria. For example, the Assyrians were allowed to build temples to their gods, breaking the covenant with Yahweh. It was just such an accommodation that Isaiah preached against, because the covenant with Yahweh needed to be preserved for the good of God's people. Isaiah was reported to have been put to death by the king Manasseh 40 years after he began his preaching. For Bible Background, I'm Maggie Linton.
It's your turn to go first this week on the question, what is God calling me to do this week?
I think this is a great gospel for me. Because of my work here in Washington with the Citizen Peace Office, I have to work with politicians all the time. And I've met some really great men and women who are really doing this out of their Christian values. But I sometimes find that I start to think more like a politician than I do like a Christian leader or a priest. And this is a great reminder that as whatever the issues are this week that might come up with, as far as legislation that we're talking about, I need to think about this as a Christian and as a priest more than I'm thinking about the politics of it and the wheeling and dealing. And what am I bringing to the table that is different from, let's say, someone on a congressional staff or the lobbyist who might be on the other side of the issue from us. So rereading this gospel and reflecting on it, I really think I need to remind myself more often that I'm here not as just a lobbyist or as a Washington insider, but I'm here representing the church, I'm here representing our faith, and we bring something different to that. If I don't, then what am I really doing here?
Good reflect.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm thinking, my boys were asked to, in religious ed, take a leader, a Christian leader, and do a biography. And one did Romero, and the other Dorothy Day. And I'm thinking that I want to do Archbishop Tuan.
Yeah.
Because you intrigue me about his journey in that world. So I just might give myself a little homework assignment this week.
Well, one of the resources, he spoke at Encuentro in Los Angeles a few years ago and gave a talk about how Jesus was impractical. And one of the things I remember is he was a very bad business manager. He said because he paid the people who came to work at the beginning of the day the same he paid the people at the end of the day. And he says, you don't make money doing that. So it was a wonderful speech. And I think you'd get a lot reading that and then doing your own little report on it.
Good.
Great.
All right. Father DeBow and I have discussed God's call. It's time for you to do the same. When you've completed that brief discussion, come back to the tape for a closing prayer. We've heard the words of our gospel reading and we've reflected on its message. Now join the choir of St. Augustine's as they lead us in song.
There is a sweet and blessed story, a story that must be told, right from his throne in glory. Something the world should know. Don't you know that Jesus lived to me? His mercy's full and free. He changed sin and sadness to joy and gladness. It's mighty nice. It's mighty nice. We can go for the Lord. We can go for the Lord. It's all right to be obedient. For the Lord, Lord, it's all right to be obedient.
Thanks for sharing God's Word with us today. We've just completed another edition of Sunday to Sunday. Next week, Tony Marinelli will be with us as we reflect on the 30th Sunday in Ordinary Time. So be sure to join us. Till then, for all the folks at Paulist Media Works, I'm Carole Lehan. Bye. Hello there, I'm Carole Lehan. Welcome to Sunday to Sunday. Tony Marinelli is with us. Tony is a pastoral minister at St. Patrick's Parish, Huntington, New York. The Sunday to Sunday players will proclaim the gospel. This Sunday we read from the Gospel of Mark. Then Maggie Linton will tell us about Jeremiah on Bible background. And the Georgetown Chorale will bring our program to a close with a hymn prayer for the beauty of the earth. That's what we have lined up for you on this edition of Sunday to Sunday on this 30th Sunday in Ordinary Time, 2003. In today's first reading, the prophet Jeremiah speaks in an exuberant and joyful voice. He exhorts the Israelites to rejoice and shout for joy. The cause of Jeremiah's joy is simple. At this point in Jewish history, the Israelites are returning from their painful exile in Babylon, and they have much to celebrate. Most of all, they rejoice in God's faithfulness to them during their trials. The remnant of Israel that Jeremiah speaks of refers to that part of the Jewish population that remained after this time of persecution and exile. In these verses, the remnant of Israel is made up of those on the margins of Jewish society, mothers and pregnant women, the blind and the lame. These people are the ones specially loved by Yahweh. Once they had to leave their land in sorrow, now they return with joyful and grateful hearts and voices. You'll find the reading in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 31, verses 7 to 9. In the verses of our second reading, the author of Hebrews is reflecting on the priesthood of Jesus against the background of the Jewish priesthood. The Jewish temple high priest was consecrated to God to serve the interests of the people. Since one of his tasks was to offer sacrifices for the sins of the people, it was necessary for him to empathize with them in their weaknesses. Jesus is like the priests of old. His humanity enables him to identify with every human weakness. Christ is our high priest, and in him we have one who remains in solidarity with our human condition. His humility is an example for us to follow. You can read those verses in the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 5, verses 1 to 6. And you'll find the final reading in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, verses 46 to 52. After everyone in your group has read those verses, share your thoughts on today's theme. We'll be back here when you're ready. Tony Marinelli joins me. Welcome, Tony.
Hi, Carole.
This week we read the story of Jesus curing the blind beggar named Bartimaeus. It looks to me like one of those stories that has many different layers to it.
That's a good way to put it. Let's try to unpeel this story like an onion.
Okay, what's on the first layer?
I think we need to look first at Bartimaeus' words. He calls out to Jesus by the title, Son of David. In fact, he does it twice. And that title has immediate meaning. It's all these messianic overtones to it. The Son of David is the promised anointed one of God who will save his people. So layer one on the onion introduces Jesus as this messianic character.
Okay, let's peel to layer two. What's next?
Layer two is when we look at the response of the people to Bartimaeus. What do? Tell him to shut up. They scold him for being so assertive. So on layer two we find, I think, what is the sad story of Israel and really of all humanity, ignoring the cry of the poor.
What's layer number three?
Now we see Jesus' response. He calls the blind beggar over to him. Jesus reveals the kind of Messiah that he will be. And it's not the typical son of David, the military son. It's more like the prophetic notion that we find in today's first reading. He's the one who brings sight to the blind and reaches out to the poor and the abandoned.
Okay, are we done with the layers?
Heck no, we're just warming up. Actually, the climax to the story is found when the blind man not only sees, but then follows Jesus. So Mark is introducing really a whole new level of meaning here. This is no longer simply a story about a blind man and Jesus. It's now a story about all of us. We are all the blind man. We are all the beggar on the side of the road. How so? We are all in need of a vision beyond mere sight. And it's Christ who will give us the way. It is Christ who will provide not only sight, but insight. So this last layer is when we shine the light of the story on ourselves and on our own lives, and when we ask for the grace to recognize our own blindness, when we allow our vision to be focused by the way that Jesus looks at the world.
Thanks, Tony. As you ponder God's Word, listen and watch the Sunday to Sunday players proclaim the gospel.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." And so they called the blind man and said to him, "Take courage, get up, Jesus is calling you." So he threw off his cloak, sprang up and came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him in reply, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him and said, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go on your way. Your faith has saved you." Immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way.
Tony has some reflections on today's gospel.
Thanks, Carole. St. Thomas Aquinas is generally regarded as the most brilliant Catholic theologian in history. And here's his definition of faith. Faith is intellectual assent to divinely revealed truth. Now, I suppose if I had an IQ of 180 like Thomas, I might also think of faith in terms of intellectual assent. But I don't, and I don't. If I want to meditate on the meaning of faith, I'm much more comfortable with the story of Bartimaeus than with the definition of Thomas. For me, faith is listening to the cry of the poor. For me, faith is a way of seeing. Faith is a recognition of blindness. Faith is a movement from darkness to light. Faith is following Jesus. One of the biggest enemies of all of this is complacency and comfort. Like the people in this story, I would rather not hear the cry of the poor. Shut up, please. You're interrupting my happiness. So I find ways to block them out. And often it's in doing perfectly good things that absorb my time and energy and reward me with feelings of fulfillment. But faith calls on me to listen for the cry of the poor. I have a friend who travels to Guatemala every summer to spend time with the poor. And each year he invites me to travel along. I never have, but this year I will. And I have no idea what I will find or what it will mean. But it's a way to listen. And I leave in a week. Faith challenges me to see differently. It invites me to view the world through the lens of God's grace. Like those in the story, I would prefer to see what I want to see. Can I see Christ in the poor? Can I see Christ in my own children? Can I see Christ in my students? When I look at the world, what do I see? Faith invites me to recognize my blindness, and it challenges me to be part of a community and to listen to other voices, to be open to other experiences. I live in a country that has been blind from time to all kinds of things, to racism, blind to sexism, and has struggled to turn those around, to see differently. And as a church, we've often been blind to the full dignity of women or the contributions to be made by the laity. Faith challenges me to examine my conscience, to explore my blindness, to admit my limitations. Faith is following Christ. And for me, that means two things. First, reflecting on the Gospels. Secondly, trying to live in the Spirit. Jesus gives us the basic principles, but it's the Spirit who leads. And following Christ doesn't mean for me going to church, although I do. That's too easy. It means entering into the world and into relationships guided by the Spirit of truth and the Spirit of love. So, Lord, this week you invite us into a story about blindness and sight. Give us the grace to see Thee more clearly and follow Thee more nearly each day this week.
Thank you. It's time for your discussion, and we have some discussion starters for you. First, have you experienced God's healing power? Second, how does faith bring a different perspective to life? And a third, how can you prepare for the close of another liturgical year in the coming weeks? I hope these starters are a help to your discussion. When you've finished with it, come back to the tape. Maggie Linton will share some of her thoughts with us. Maggie Linton joins us now on Bible Background with some interesting thoughts on the book of Jeremiah.
Jeremiah was a bullfrog, the old song has it, but in history, Jeremiah was a lot more than a bullfrog. Jeremiah was a prophet. He came from a long line of distinguished priests and lived in a small village northeast of Jerusalem. He spoke out for God when Judah was undergoing terrible times. There was a great deal of corruption in Judah, and Jeremiah could see it. He spoke against the kings of Judah, saw his works as treason. The corruption of Judah led to the fall of Jerusalem, just as Jeremiah had predicted. Jeremiah was relentless in preaching against idolatry and injustice, and he was required to make great personal sacrifices for his beliefs. For example, Jeremiah never married, as witness to the terrible devastation that would come to Jerusalem. The Hebrew belief that raising children is a joy would be thwarted. After the fall of Jerusalem, people would begin to see the horrors their children would face, and so Jeremiah never married rather than bring children into a world that he knew would be completely contrary to Jewish customs. For Bible Background, I'm Maggie Linton.
Tony, it's your turn to go first this week on the question, what is God calling me to do this week?
This idea of listening for the voices, you know, the people telling Bartimaeus to shut up in this thing. And I'm not that rude, you know? So I just don't listen, you know? And being attentive to the voices in my life that I'm not paying enough attention to. And two of them come to mind, and they are the names of my daughters, Christine and Caitlin. As I was reflecting on this, how can I be more attentive to them? Because, you know, they're not kids anymore, and yet there's a new relationship with them. As, you know, Christine's a young adult now, and Kate's 16, and I'm never exactly sure how to connect to them at this age. You know, I'm pretty clueless. But to try to be more attentive to what I can do in responding to them. And perhaps it comes out as affirmation, and to make sure that I don't forget to let them know, you know, that they're special and I love them and stuff like that, which can be easier to do at this age.
Yeah, I don't know what you just said that just sent a bell off for me. But one of the things that you said in your reflection is about being blind to experiences. And I just made my son start a course, an SAT prep course. And he was so upset with me. He said, I'm not going to know anyone in this class. And this is something that you want me to do. It's not something I want to do. You're not even listening to how I feel or what I'm thinking. And I thought, I'm just going to hold the line. He'll be glad that he did it. And you said something that reminded me of wisdom that I had for someone else the other day, but apparently not using myself. And that is, a friend was saying that she doesn't know how to connect anymore with her very young son. And she doesn't know what she's doing. All of a sudden, she thinks she's a bad mom. And my wisdom was that like a good teacher, it might be good for a certain age, but as a student gets older, the teacher doesn't always connect with every age, but is really good teacher for a particular age. And that the parent has to relearn the connection with all the time as the child grows. And using old strategies, you know, that worked a couple of years ago, they don't necessarily apply. And that was very clear to me at the time talking to her. But that's what I have to do.
Sure.
Because I was kind of talking to him like he was younger.
Yeah.
And not really listening. And kind of being blind. And I should have probably prepped in a different way. So among other things, I need to apologize for myself being blind.
Well, what are you going to do, though? Is he going to still take this course?
Yeah, probably. Why did you set me up like that? I think maybe I'll ask him what he would have preferred, because at this point, since there's something that I want him to do and feel that it's necessary for him to do, how could I have gone about it a different way?
Yeah.
And recognizing his real fear. He is great in front of a group of people, in front of talking to hundreds of people in a character on stage, but going into a room of people that he doesn't know is paralyzing for him. And I really recognize that.
As it is for most teenagers. You know, no matter how extroverted, they want connection. So the reason I asked you what are you going to do is because it's so hard to take your insights into things and then make them real.
And apply it.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm asking so I can learn, because I don't know what the heck I'm doing either. In this video, probably think we're pretty smart and wise, but when it comes down to trying to apply this stuff,
fooled.
yeah, exactly, in our own lives, it's hard.
No, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Well, Tony discussed God's call. It's time for you to do this. When you've completed that brief discussion, come back to the tape for a closing prayer. We've heard our gospel reading and we've reflected on its message. Now join me in listening to the Georgetown Chorale as they bring our program to a close with a hymn for the beauty of the earth. Thanks for sharing God's Word with us today. We've just completed another edition of Sunday to Sunday. Next week, Father Stan DeBow will be with us as we reflect on the feast of All Souls Day. So be sure to join us. Till then, for all the folks at Paulist Media Works, Lehan. Bye.